All right, we're going to go ahead and start. Today is Thursday, August 13th. The time is 6 o'clock. And I'm going to open the special meeting. Can I get a roll call, please?
Flores Kale,
Here.
Tobias,
Present.
Goza,
Here.
Medina,
Here.
Zapata, McKinney, Harris.
All right, we have 4, so we have a quorum. If we could all please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. All right, thank you. Next, we have citizens' comments. The City Council welcomes comments from citizens. Those wishing to speak are encouraged to sign in before the meeting begins. Speakers will be provided with an opportunity to speak during this time period on any agenda item or any other matter concerning City Council business, and we ask that you observe the 3-minute time limit. All right, first up, I have Nicholas Escamillo.
Okay. So I live in Silverado. I've lived in Kyle for 20 years. And the 2 issues I wanted to talk about today was the more traffic in Kyle and the new D-Flock cameras. I know they've been here for a year, but the traffic, especially on Veterans Drive, I know they're adding a shopping center, a church, and school's starting back up. And the stop sign there already backs up a mile. It's really hard to turn out of my neighborhood. And that's a concern of mine. Ever since after COVID, the traffic here gets worse and worse. And I know y'all added the turn lane, but I'm concerned that the church and the new shopping centers, a 50-foot turn lane won't be enough. And then the new flock cameras, first off, I saw that Kyle has around 47 flock cameras. It has a population of 60,000. And then the city of Austin, I think 1 million residents, it has 40. I don't know why Kyle needs so many. I get that it helps the police, it tracks plates, but it's also a privacy concern for many people. I know some of my neighbors have talked about it, and I don't understand why the police needs to know. There's one at my neighborhood entrance, one where I get on the highway and my exit on the highway. So it knows whenever I go home, leave, anywhere I go in Kyle, there's a flock camera. And I know it says, oh, it's only for plates, my data doesn't get stored. Every 30 days it's deleted. But I don't know if I trust that company. And I didn't consent to have my plate read everywhere I go, every time I leave my home to be scanned. But yeah, those were the 2 main concerns. I know the traffic is hard because a lot of people move to Kyle. It's one of the fastest growing cities. But as a longtime resident, it seems like my quality of life has been going down. I know y'all like the new property tax money from all the new buildings or the new neighborhoods and the new stores, but I don't know, just as a longtime resident, it just feels like the city isn't the same as it was. And that's all I wanted to talk about.
Okay, thank you. All right, up next, I have Tracy Seeger-Sharkey.
Hello, thank y'all for the opportunity to speak. My name is Tracy Seeger-Sharkey, and I live in Amberwood. And I'm here to talk about the pet situation, the animal shelter that I know I'm having faith it's going to be built. Don't know how it's going to be funded, but aside all that, I just wanted to, my intention for speaking is so you can be aware of TNR and you can be aware of the problem that we've had in Amberwood. 3 years ago, we started seeing tons of deceased cats and kittens on our streets, in front of my house, beside my house, everywhere. It was devastating to see. To make a long story short, I became an official volunteer to do TNR for the city. And Brianna has been amazing. She is a rock star, and I hope y'all listen to everything she says about the shelter. But the issue is I've lost count. Actually, it's 55 or 60 cats. Right now I have 5 that I need to trap. So we have a serious issue with this. And I just wanted to let y'all know the way I do it. This is probably going to be like the interim plan. I work with pals. I trap the cats in my neighborhood and around. That's like 7 streets for me. I take them to pals. In the past, I've paid a lot of money for extra shots and things like that. I don't have my numbers with me. I wish I would have had time this week to gather my numbers. I kind of don't want to look at it because in the past 3 years, it's less than $10,000, I think, but it's right around there with all this cat food and just everything of doing it. It's the biggest burden in my life. I don't want to do it. I do it because the animals are suffering. Okay, and this is just a diversion. They don't go into the shelter. I found homes for them. Several they're feral, and I take care of them. We have caretakers. It's just an issue, and I just wanted to start the conversation and introduce myself because I've done a lot for this city, and I've paid a lot of my own pocket. Another thing is, I want y'all to think about is the vet care that I pay for with my colony. I've had 2 that I've had to have x-rays. I thought I could rehab them, but I ended up having to put them to sleep. That was just over $1,000. And I can't take them to PALS. They don't do emergency care. You know, they're just not set up for that, as amazing as they are. We don't have that, so I end up paying for that. And I know a county shelter can't provide that. They can't provide veterinarian care. So there's going to have to be either some sort of separate nonprofit or something, or set up with some vets or something, because I can't continue to pay these vet bills for these cats. I will continue to pay it. I'm just complaining right now, but I just wanted, and I'm sorry, this is the first time y'all met me, and I hate to just come in complaining, but it's just a real issue, and I want y'all to be really familiar with TNR and, you know, how we've been managing it and how we'll continue to manage it in the interim until we get a shelter built. I'm also concerned about the GO bill. If that doesn't pass, and then we have to wait 5 more years for a shelter, that's just going to be worse. So that's my last concern. Okay, thank y'all.
Thank you. Up next, I have Howard Cottle.
Here we go again. Good evening, my mayor and council members. I have a question. Why did city manager Brian Lang hire Raftellus to do a water rate study for 2025 and 26? I've never heard any reason why that may have been done, but it was done. So, if you have a toothache, like I did, you go to a dentist to get it fixed. If you're a city manager and your city is coming up short, you've got to find somebody. Raftellus is the people to go to. You go to them and you say, I'm short, find me some money. I've heard people from Sixth Creek get up here and say, well, the water study was skewed, this, that, whatever. Well, okay, maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. But after I read you this, you're probably going to have your hair stand up. Raftellus, what do? We do identification of price objectives, work with you to develop pricing objectives that deliver the rate structure that best suits your strategic and operational goals. These objectives range from promoting water conservation to addressing affordability concerns to foster economic development and more. Customized rate fee structures. We have developed thousands of customized rate structures and fees to meet specific needs and goals of our clients, such as Kyle and their shareholders. There is no one-size-fits-all solution, and we use our experience to help you determine the optimal rate structure for your agency, being the city. Development of comprehensive financial planning. Utility rates and municipal fees are set based on revenue requirements and the number of accounts from which these costs must be recovered. We employ a proven data-driven method for forecasting costs and customer data to inform our rate selling process. We work with you to execute this written, comprehensive, reliable, and flexible financial plan. Our financial planning system forecasts operation and maintenance costs, capital needs, customer usage, and monitors your overall financial performance. In other words, we'll give you whatever we need to get you some money. Gaining a buyback of adoption. Your governing body must approve your rate or fee structure. So we don't just design sound rates, we bring you communication and outreach experts to help you build understanding and support for your new rates and fees. In other words, a BS story, in my opinion. We help you demonstrate the true value of your services and comprehensive analysis behind our recommended rates to ensure broad stakeholder buy-in, which means approval and adoption. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Up next, I have Carol Dogans.
Okay. Good evening, members of the council. My name is Carol Dogans, and I'm here because last year's 77% ETJ water rate hikes were built on a model that has already been proven flawed. Raftillus came back this year and removed the $18 million of revenue needed that justified the increase, but left the outside city rate untouched. Kyle now charges ETJ residents an 86% premium, nearly triple the highest premium in the region. It appears that these numbers have never been re-examined under the current model. Tonight, I am asking Raftillus, he's probably not here, to explain how this rate was built, why it remains frozen, and how it meets the PUC just and reasonable standards. I have a few questions. I know y'all are not going to answer them. Why was the outside city rates not re-examined after the $18 million correction? What specific costs that justified the 86% premium for ETJ customers when no regional utility exceeded 29%? Why did Raftillus' presentation compare only in-city rates to neighboring cities and omitting the outside city comparison? Was Raftillus instructed by the city to freeze the ETJ rates, or was that an independent recommendation? Does Raftillus affirm that the 86 premium meets the PUC's just and reasonable standards under Texas law? If last year's model overstated revenue need by $18 million, what assurance can you give that the ETJ cost allocation was not also overstated? Can you identify any cost categories where ETJ customers are paying more than their proportional share? And if so, will you commit to correcting that allocation? Thank you.
Thank you. If you have that piece of paper, I wouldn't mind, Ms. Dogans. If you'd like me to ask those questions, I can.
Oh, you can answer all those?
Yeah, if you just want to, I can, but I can ask them. Raftillus is actually here. And yes, the representative is here. So I would be more than glad if you want to hand your questions. I can have somebody on council, ask them. All right, thank you. All right, up next I have Kenneth Rocha.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. I want to speak to the proposed tax rate options and why the numbers behind them matter as much as the rate itself. This year's certified taxable value fell 1.2%, and you're going to hear about the city's own calculation showing something unusual, with the no new revenue rate being actually higher than the voter approval rate. I'm interested in hearing and understanding how this inversion came to be. We're all aware of how our reserve fell from roughly 34 million to just over 10 million over the last 3 budget cycles. And of the 14.2 million shortfall that this budget is built to close. Staff's own materials say year 1 is about restoring reserves, and year 2 shifts to capital and debt funds. I'd ask council to hold that line before layering on new debt-funded capital commitments. Good governance isn't slower government. This is a request for governance discipline going forward that includes real-time budget metrics so council can see capital spending, debt actions, and reserve positions all together, rather than learning the combined effect only after a shortfall appears. Please build that safeguard into this budget cycle, not the next one. I fully believe with the right leadership and diligence, we can return to our 2023 status of a reserve fund that was healthy, and the envy of Texas, and a rating agency asset. Thank you for your time and commitment to really looking at these numbers. I really do appreciate it.
All right, thank you. All right, those are all the forms I have. Would anybody like to come up and speak? All right, thank you. Okay. Up next, I have Larry Golick.
Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, and council ladies. My name is Larry Golick, a resident of Kyle from Six Creeks. Water and sewer rates must be just and reasonable. That is the standard the PUC will hold the city of Kyle to. Raftellus is here tonight and will present their recommendations for the fiscal year 27 water and wastewater rates. They've consulted with the city on rates for fiscal year 25, 26, and now 27. In 25, in-city rates were raised while out-of-city rates remained unchanged. Raftellus told us that was because there was a PUC docket in Leander that would help decide how to proceed for out-of-city rates. While out-of-city rates didn't rise in 25, we were still paying 27% more than in-city customers. For 26 planning, Raftellus recommended a rate increase of 20% and 77% for in-city and out-of-city respectively. The Leander docket had been settled. Raftellus reported they had confidence raising the out-of-city rates would hold up against a PUC appeal because the Leander final order denied that rate appeal. Keep in mind, Leander water rates were some of the lowest in the area, and that appeal was for a 10% increase. When setting the rates last year, the data provided to Raftellus skewed in favor of aggressive water and sewer infrastructure projects. This year, we learned that was a policy decision, not one out of necessity, leading in part to the exaggerated cost of service study. Raftellus produced the results the city wanted, but the city wasn't prepared to build or begin building anything. Did the study include this infrastructure when calculating the rates? Regardless, faulty inputs are not the only issue. Questions must be asked of Raftellus about their data and quality controls. How thorough are their internal reviews? Do they audit their own reports or have third parties audit them? In fiscal year 26, Raftellus study is found, if the fiscal year 26 Raftellus study is found to be flawed and unable to support the 77% increase, will there be refunds? Council, I ask you to question Raftellus why they are showing you a particular picture this evening. I've provided each of you with it. You will see a sample of water and sewer rates from peer cities. These give the casual viewer impression that Kyle's rates are reasonable. They're in the range. What isn't shown in that comparison is in-city and out-of-city rates for those peer cities. 11 in total. Did you know of these, some have no differential between in and out-of-city rates? Others show differentials as low as 10%, but as high as 30%. Then there's Kyle, with a whopping 86% differential, nearly 3 times higher than the next contender. Ask yourself this: as the PUC hears this evidence and weighs its options and potential refunds, the burden of proof is on the city across multiple criteria. If any one is found unreasonable, that is grounds for granting the appeal. Now ask yourself again, are Kyle's rates just and reasonable? What I presented to each of you is this, which is a slide that is in the Raftellus deck for tonight. I'm questioning the Pflugerville cost on here showing $228. If you flip to the next page, I pulled Pflugerville's data down that they posted today on Twitter. That same 5,500 gallon differential shows about 193. It shows 185 on here for 5,000. I rounded it to 193 for 5,500. So 228 to 193 is quite a difference. And that, when you lay in the outside city rates in comparison, you end up seeing Kyle is clearly the highest by far, being 39% higher than Pflugerville and 74% higher than Kyle's in-city rates. Now, you heard 86%. I think that's faulty because the data that I've seen shows 140 to 243 is our price difference. The Raftellus reports show 140 and comparing it to 261. I don't believe that number's correct. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, I do not have any more forms. Would anybody else like to come up and speak? All right, seeing none, I am going to close citizens' comments. I would like to make a motion to approve Laura, Councilmember Harris's absence. She did notify us, well, she notified the city manager that she was not going to be here due to work. And so with that, I'd like to make a motion to approve.
Second.
I got a motion to approve, a second by Mayor Pro Tem. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
We also have Ms. Zapata online.
Motion passes to 5-0. All right, up next, consider impossible action. Receive a report, hold a discussion, and provide staff direction regarding the following. That's agenda item 1. I don't need to read all that, right? You guys got it? All right, item presenter is going to be Perez Mohit.
Mayor Pro Tem, council members, for the record, I'm Pervez Mohit, city's interim city manager and director of finance. Before we bring up Raftellus to present their 2026 update results, I wanted to share a few pieces of information with you. So this evening, I'm going to go over some background information. At a very high level, I'm going to cover what the objectives of a cost of service and rate study is all about. And then I'm going to go over as an interim city manager, my recommendations for the water and sewer rates that I presented to council on August 1st. And then I'm also going to go over why I am recommending those rates. And then after that, I'm going to introduce Ms. Angie Flores. She's vice president with Raftellus Financial. She'll go over the 2026 cost of service study update. And then we'll open it up for question and answers. So speaking of background information, City Council approved a contract to retain the services of Raftellus Financial Consultants to conduct the initial cost of service and rate study for the city's water and wastewater service and subsequent updates. In fiscal year 25-26, the current fiscal year that we're in, Raftellus Financial was directed by the former city manager to update the water and wastewater cost of service and rate model for all inside city and outside city water and wastewater customer classes. So that was their task for this fiscal year, and they will go over the results of that assignment. So very briefly, at a very high level, without going into chapters and verses, the primary objective of a cost of service and rate study is to determine city's cost of providing water and wastewater service to each customer class and determine water and wastewater rates to recover the city's cost from each one of those customer classes for providing water and sewer service. That, in a nutshell, is the bottom line objective of a cost of service rate study. So what did I recommend as part of the proposed budget to City Council on August 1st? In my recommended proposed budget to City Council, I recommended to City Council that there be no rate increase for water service for all inside and outside city customer classes. Additionally, I also recommended to City Council that there should be no rate increase for wastewater service for all inside city and outside city customer classes. So whatever the rates are, they're suspended at that level. And these are the reasons why I recommended that there should be, at least for the time being, no rate change. As you may recall, from May 5th on, I have embarked with our team to look at the cost structure of every city function and activity throughout the city organization, department by department, line item by line item. And water utilities was included in that. We've done a lot of changes at the water utilities cost structure. So significant cost reduction and cost containment measures have been implemented within the city's water utilities department during the current fiscal year. And are also incorporated, those cost containment measures are also incorporated into the proposed fiscal year budget for next year. So the utilities cost structure is changing, right? And we haven't completely finished that task of reviewing the utility in total. We still have some ways to go because we are now going to look at the CIP side, or the capital structure side of the water utility system. So as the cost structure is changing, it would be prudent on our part not to raise rates or change rates because we don't know where we're going to end up after we get done with all the cost containment measures. That's one big thing. Secondly, these cost-saving initiatives are expected to substantially affect the utilities cost structure and the allocation of functional costs during fiscal years 27, this coming fiscal year, and the year following that. And it will involve all of it. Water supply. When we talk about water supply, we're talking about GBRA, we're talking about ARWA, we're talking about Edwards Aquifer, all of our portfolios. We're talking about our operations and maintenance cost. We're talking about our capital improvement projects that the utility has planned over the next 5 years. We're going to examine very closely the sequencing of those projects. Are they in alignment with our master water supply plan? Because the master supply plan identifies our supply needs based on projections, what we're going to need, and how are we going to meet those needs? What are the sources of this water supply? But you'll also recall that we started a new project this year whereby we are re-examining how we plan our water supply needs. In the past, we relied on developers to tell us their LUEs or their water demands in the future. We asked the water department this year to look at very closely every single development agreements we have in place. What have we committed to in supplying those developers? And then look at how real are those projections of the developers? Because if I was a developer, I'll tell you I need the whole thing, and the whole thing within the next 5 years, especially if that reservation is for free. But on our side of the fence, on the city side, when a developer gives us their needs, we're relying on those commitments that we have to secure that water supply based on the timing of that developer's projections. So it's easy the developer to just tell us we need 10,000 LUEs. But for us, it's costing us money to buy the water supply, to make sure it's going to be available. We got to make sure the infrastructure is in the ground to that water in place when the developer says he or she needs it. So what we're doing now is, okay, Mr. Developer or Miss Developer, if you're serious about these projections, then you're going to have to pay for the reservation. Because it's costing us and our ratepayers, your projection is costing us. So with that program that's going to come before council for approval very shortly, I think that's going to change the picture of how we plan our water supply significantly. That water gap in our supply graph that you have seen in the past, I think that's going to shift because of these tightening that we are doing in the operation side, the future planning side for water supply, for associated infrastructure. All of those things are going to shift. So the next 2 years are very critical in terms of the cost structure for our water and wastewater systems. So it would be prudent on our part not to change the water rates at this point because our cost structure is changing. And that cost structure may result in shifting the rate increases that we have projected in the past. We may not need those as we thought we were going to.
Can I ask a question? I have a question because I feel like ever since I left my first term, there's never been a real solid idea of how much water we have. And I've always said I see more going out than coming in. And now with the Nueces River Authority kind of in limbo or in question, my question to you is, do we have a real clear idea of how much water we have or where we're at with our water supply?
We know exactly what our supply capacity is. What we are not sure on the planning horizon, what our demand is. If that projection is inaccurate, then the gap that we're trying to chase is inaccurate. So we will be coming back before council, not far from now, to show you the updated water master plan, the updated projections, and where our gaps are, if there are any gaps.
Okay.
So that will be coming before council very soon.
Thank you.
And finally, the third point I wanted to get across why I am recommending a no rate increase or change in rate increase. We do have healthy fund balances in both our water and wastewater utility funds. So we can sustain next year without a rate increase until it also gives us time to complete our cost containment analysis, restructuring the cost model of our utilities, restructuring our capital improvements program based on our supply needs. So with that, I'm gonna introduce Ms. Flores to come up. She's with Raftellus, and she's gonna walk you through the 26 update. Now, my recommendations to council for the rate is not based on cost of service. We're not implementing cost of service next year. My recommendation is based on a financial plan that indicates we have a healthy fund balance in both utilities. We do not need to adjust the rates or increase the rates at this time. So with that, Angie? Thank you. So you just flip one.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. For the record, I'm Angie Flores with Raftellus. So happy to be here to present the results of the most recent study. So in my presentation, I'll be presenting our study objectives. I'll go through some of the assumptions in the most recent study, as well as provide you with some background of the process that we go through with our studies. We'll then look at that financial outlook that Pervez was just talking about, and then we'll look at rate impacts and comparisons to neighboring communities. So first, I want to start with a little bit of rate study background, which has already been mentioned by others here. So we did the initial study for your FY 2025 budget year. So we were here in that would have been about 24 that we were here. During that study, we developed your 5-year financial planning model. That model is specific to Kyle. It has your data in it, so that's your consumption data, your budget data. We also look at some historical consumption data, historical budgets, actuals. All of that information goes into the model. It also includes your capital improvement plan, which is mentioned by Pervez, is a significant part of that forecast. You have a hefty CIP plan, especially on the wastewater side, so that CIP plan is in that model. Finally, within that model, we also do our cost of service and rate analysis that we've been presenting to you every year. So that first year, as mentioned previously, we completed an inside city limit cost of service. We did not do the outside city cost of service at that time because of rate cases that were before the Public Utility Commission. We were waiting for some results from those rate cases to make sure that we were following the same methodology and process that would ultimately be approved by the PUC. So that first year, there were no rate increases to the OCL. They were left the same. In 2025, we came back and looked at your FY 2026 budget. We updated that same financial planning model. We looked at your historical consumption to see, where we were tracking, what it was looking like, how your customers were using water. And at that time, we completed the cost of service analysis for the OCL customers. And here in a minute, I'll go through that process and that cost of service process that we did for both ICL and OCL. At that time, and for that FY26 study, we increased the rates for the inside city limit customers as well as the outside city limit customers. Now we're updating the plan for your FY 2027 budget. And so the model has now been updated for the next 5 years, FY 27 through FY 2031. As Pervez mentioned, we are not recommending any rate increases, so there will be no changes to ICL or OCL rates. So the rate study process. So the first step in doing these studies is we determine how much we need to fund. And as I mentioned before, that includes your budget, which is your operations and maintenance expense budget. We consider your capital plan, and then look at that forecast of that financial plan based on forecasted revenues at existing rates. So we first look at that plan with no rate adjustments to determine what additional rate revenue may be required. The second step, and this is really when we do that cost of service analysis, is to determine who should pay for that revenue requirement. And so we'll look at how your classes of customers are using the system for inside and outside city customers. So that's kind of the second step. Who should pay for that revenue requirement and how? And so that's the third step, is how should they pay? So again, looking at what that revenue requirement is by class, and then determining how they should pay for that through their rates. So that's essentially the process we've been following the last 3 years. I wanted to cover the cost of service process. I know some of you weren't here last year when we did the past 2 years when we did the cost of service analysis. So I did want to walk through that a little bit. So So the cost of service process, again, starts with that revenue requirement. What are the costs that need to be recovered by the rates? We take those costs and we functionalize them. And essentially what that means is we go into detail about what are the costs paying for. We talked a little bit about water supply that Pervez was just discussing. For Kyle, your water supply costs are a big portion of your operations. Of course, then we have storage, you have pumping, getting the water out to your customers, the transmission lines, distribution lines within the subdivisions, and then, of course, meters and billing. So all those costs are separated into those buckets. Then from there, we allocate those costs between base, which is your average type usage. So we determine, which of these costs are related to just providing day-to-day usage on an average basis. Then we look at what are those max day and max hour demand costs. So these are for your residential customers that use more water in the summertime to water our lawns. That causes a peak in your system. Well, your facilities have to be sized appropriately and your water supply has to be sufficient to serve those customers at that peak demand. So there's costs related to being able to provide the average usage as well as that peak usage. So we go through that process of figuring out which costs are appropriate in those buckets. And then finally, meters and billing are another component of that allocation. Finally, those costs are allocated to the customer classes based on their units of demand. From an average perspective, a peak perspective, the number of meters, and the number of bills that we provide them. And so that's how the revenue requirement is determined for each class. So customer classes with higher peak demands are then allocated more costs is typically how this falls out. Now, I do want to mention that for outside city limits, the revenue requirement, which is at the beginning, is a little bit different. And again, following the methodology that was completed in the Leander rate case, we actually use what we refer to in the industry as a utility basis methodology. In that case, we use O&M expenses. We actually look at your assets that are used and useful to the outside city limit customers. So it's a little bit different. It's not debt service. It's actually what are the assets that are in place to serve those customers. And then we charge them the depreciation on those assets and a rate of return that is based on your cost of capital. So it's a really complex methodology. It's a little bit more difficult to explain than this other process, but it is a little bit different. It allows the city to really be sure that you're recovering your investment that your inside city limit customers have put on the system to serve those outside city limit customers. So same thing on wastewater. We follow the same process. Obviously for wastewater, your facilities are a little bit different. In Kyle, y'all have a wastewater treatment plant. You've got collection, conveyance, and of course, lift stations and bills as well there. For wastewater, the parameters that we use that are a little bit different from what I was talking about on water, which, the base and the peak. For wastewater, we use flow, strength loadings, and bills. For Kyle, you don't really have differing strength loadings by customers. You don't really have, major industrial customers that would have different strength loadings in your wastewater. And then same thing here. the units of demand for each customer class build up the revenue requirement for each customer class. So one thing I wanted to mention is that cost of service is typically done by utilities about every 3 to 5 years. It's not an analysis that is completed every single year. And in fact, I wanted to mention that SAWS does their cost of service analysis about every 3 to 5 years. They actually have a policy in place that requires that the cost of service analysis be updated every 5 years. MBU, they do their cost of service every 2 years. They don't really have a formal policy. They've just recently decided to do about every 2 years. They had been doing about every 5 years. San Marcos actually does an annual review of their rates. They do some cost of service within their model, but it's not done every single year. Austin Water, they also have a policy to do their cost of service every 5 years. I do want to mention, however, that all of these cities look at their rates on an annual basis, so they're updating their financial plan, updating those forecasts to ensure that their rates are in the right place as they're looking at their budget every year. So for the FY27 budget and your model, I do want to remind you that when we did the model for the FY26 model, we had been forecasting a need of a 20% increase again this year. And that was based primarily on your capital improvement plan. We had a pretty robust plan in the model for the next 5 years. And so really the need for that capital investment was what was driving that 20% increase. As Pervez has mentioned, this new model reflects the new expenses in his 27 budget. So that cost containment and efficiency measures are in our model. And this reduced the revenue requirement that we had forecasted for 2027 by $18 million. This included a reduction of $5 million in operations and maintenance costs, and it reduced the forecasted debt service by $13 million. And again, that's due to what we had forecasted in the capital plan. So these are the FY27 results for water. So just to kind of point you to what is showing here on the slide, there on the left side is what we call our water financial plan. This is showing those expenses. And you can see here that we've got water, the O&M is in that darker blue box there. The lighter blue box, that shows the 1.3. That is the debt service that's forecasted for FY27. And then the lines on top there are, the darker line is your revenue at existing rates. And then you'll see there that there's a lighter blue line that is deviating from that existing rate line. And that's because we do have about 2% rate increases in the plan starting in FY29. As Pervez mentioned, it's going to be important that we continue to look at this on an annual basis as your city continues to grow and as you're making some of these decisions about water supply. And just making sure that your rates are right-sized to meet your costs. I do want to draw your attention to the operating fund balance. Pervez also talked about this. Your fund balance is healthy. I do want to mention that for Kyle, one of the things that we've seen in your historical consumption is that as you move through some of your drought stages, your revenue really fluctuates, which means that your customers are doing exactly what you want them to do, which is they reduce their water consumption as you implement drought stages. So having a healthy balance, I think, for your city and the purchased water, I think it's important to have a healthier fund balance so that you can really, have that cushion if we get back into the drought again and that consumption is reduced. This is wastewater. So wastewater, you can see here on this forecast, again, just looking at that graph on the left, you can see here that we are again forecasting some rate increases, but you can also see that we're not forecasting that line is above your expenses out there starting in 29 and 30. One of the reasons for that is that on wastewater, again, you also have a healthy balance. On wastewater, you're not impacted from drought. And so one of the things we took into consideration was the possibility of using that fund balance to cover some of that shortfall in those future years. And that way you don't have to make rate adjustments to get to that full cost recovery. However, I do want to say that, again, it'll be important to look at this on an annual basis because you do have some significant wastewater treatment plant or wastewater capital needs, especially the wastewater treatment plant expansion. So again, this is just a forecast. Looking at it on an annual basis is important. So this is the forecasted inside city limit customer rate impacts. Again, no rate increase from 26 to 27. This is a monthly residential water bill at 5,500 gallons. The lighter blue bar on the bottom is the water rate, and the darker blue bar on top is your wastewater rate. So that bill is at $140. And again, then you can see the impact of those projected future rate increases. These are the rate impacts for outside city limit customers. Again, $97 on the bottom is the light blue bar is water. I'm sorry, no, that's wastewater. And then the darker blue bar is water for a monthly bill of $261. Here's the comparison to neighboring communities. I will acknowledge that this is inside city limit comparison only. So you can see there that Kyle is third from the top. Pflugerville having the higher rate there at $228. And I do want to mention that is based on a 3/4 inch meter, which Kyle, you're using a 3/4 inch meter for most of your customers now. So that's why we're comparing that to their 3/4 inch meter. Typically, cities will have the same rate for a 5/8 and 3/4 inch meter. That is not the case in Pflugerville. They actually charge a little bit more they charge a higher base charge for a 3/4 inch meter.
Is there a reason why you guys didn't add the out-of-city water comparison as well?
Not really. We can definitely provide that information. Okay. If it's something that the council would like to see, we can certainly provide it.
Okay. I would like to see it. Would anybody else like to see it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have that information. We can provide it.
Thank you.
And with that, any questions?
I guess one of the questions that was asked was, and I know the answer, but I think it's important everybody knows, why did the city, and this might be for Perez, why did the city do the water study to begin with?
Mayor, if you would please clarify the question, are you asking about this update, the recent update?
No, I think it was in
The very
generalized.
first
It was the
one.
first one. I think that was a question from the audience. Yeah, why did they do, why did Brian Langley hire Raftellus for this report?
Okay, so the city of Kyle, just going back in history, the city of Kyle has adjusted water and sewer rates for the longest time based on financial plans. We don't have to do cost of service study every year. No other city does it. No other utility does it. The norm is anywhere between 3 and 5 years. So we chugged along doing rate adjustments on a system-wide basis based on financial plan. Financial plan basically is our budget. How much are we going to spend each year for water supply, for maintenance, for infrastructure, and cash-funded CIPs. So as the system grew, we had more customers. We started borrowing more money for infrastructure, for pipes, pump stations, lift stations, things of that nature. It became important that we needed to true up the cost responsibility between customer classes, both inside and outside the city. So the former city manager, when he first started here, when he learned that we hadn't done a cost of service study in a long time, he felt very strongly that it was probably time for us to do our very first one to find out exactly if our cost structure is in alignment with our rate structure. Are we recouping the cost of the utility from the right customer classes and in the right amounts? So that was the objective of doing that study. So the very first study, as Angie mentioned, only covered inside city customers. It did not include outside city customers because there was a pending case before PUC. We wanted to make sure that whatever PUC decided, we would use the same methodology that was acceptable. So that's the first study that was done. The annual updates that the former city manager wanted to do was primarily because of that. We were heavily investing every year. If you look at our CIP, last year was $1.3 billion, and most of it was for water and wastewater projects. So he wanted to make sure that we were recovering the cost and not drawing down on the fund balances. And then within not only customer classes, but also within inside and outside city customers, that we were fairly and equitably assigning costs. So that's when all this started. The second update included outside city customers as well as updating the inside city customers. This is the third update, and you have an interim city manager that felt very strongly that given all this improvements that we're making, cost containment initiatives, elimination of redundancies, re-examining our capital spending plan, because capital spending plan, if it is not looked at very carefully, it can drive the cost of service model for projecting debt service. So that's where we are saying that we focused on the operating cost, the operating cost structure. Next year, we're going to focus on the capital spending plan and to align it with our needs, not just because some consultant told us to go spend $50 million for a water reservoir or for a pump station. We need our internal staff to assess our true needs and when those capital improvements need to come online. So that needs to happen. We haven't really completely done that. If you remember during the budget discussions, I showed you how the 5-year plan looks like. The first 3 are really high, and then the 4th and 5th year drops off the cliff. That's not normal. It shouldn't be like that. It should be evenly spread out. So we're going to do that in next year. So all of those efforts that we are undertaking with Mike Murphy and Amber's help with the entire team, we're re-examining, refocusing how we do business. And of course, that's going to impact what the model is going to have. Whatever input we give is going to have the output based on that. So I didn't want it to rely on the cost of service model to make a decision on the rates for next year. We can true up, after we get done with everything, we can true up with the cost of service study, perhaps in year number 3 or 4. It'll still be timely, it's not too late. But I wanted to be certain that we have the cost structure in place before we did a true up on rates. Because it could very well say that you don't need a rate increase for next 3 years or 2 years, whatever the case may be.
Okay. Can I have you go back to slide 21? Because you were just talking about debt. So by 2031, the city of Kyle will have as much debt as it will revenue. And that is a really scary place to be. So I'm glad that you brought up the fact that you're doing a cost containment for CIPs. Do we know how much of the CIP was going to be water, wastewater based? Like how much of our water and wastewater were going to be part of? Was it all CIPs? Or?
No, we have other CIP projects. You know, we have parks, we have roads, we have sidewalks. So for utilities, a good portion of our CIP spending plan is for our water, wastewater, and drainage utility systems. Roughly, I would say about 60% of our CIP spending plan is for non-tax supported projects. By that I mean they're not roads, streets, sidewalks. They're more for water, wastewater, and storm drainage. One thing we have to keep in mind, we're in the midst of wastewater treatment plant expansion. That by itself is about a $170 million project. And you will see that we'll have to absorb that within the rate structure for wastewater system. That has to be taken care of. But there are other projects within the wastewater model, for example, that can slide. It doesn't have to be built next year or the year after that. So those are the things we're going to examine very closely. The timing, the sequencing, the actual needs of those projects, all of that will be examined.
Okay, to put that into perspective, this time last year, we were going to spend approximately, the city, $1.2 billion in the next 5 years. That breaks down to approximately $240 million per year. And to put that in comparison, our road bond that we had bond out for 20 years, 40 years, $296 million. So to me, it is very clear and evident that if we have to bond out $300 million, I can't help but question the mentality of council and staff at the time, how they thought we were going to be able to afford $240 million a year for the next 5 years. Because that to me is not sustainable as a city when you talk about taxes and you talk about feasibility. So I'm grateful that it's been scaled back because I think our new one is still like 180. No, what is it? 900 or 800 million dollars.
So we went from $1.3 billion CIP program to about 800 million, and I think it still can be brought down some more.
Yeah, I feel like 800 million is still a significant amount, and the reality of it, and I know people want to say, but Kyle's growing and people want to live here, but if we can't afford that as a city, that's not a requirement. There's no law that states you have to grow so people can move here. So I think sometimes we've got to get out of that mentality of like, yeah, we could be like Cedar up north. There's a city that's landlocked.
Cedar Park.
Yes. Can't even come in there. You want to build? You better go somewhere else. There's no shame in that. And so I think we as a city, as a council, as leadership need to be okay with maybe right now we just can't afford to grow the way we wanted to. So again, I want to thank you personally because I feel like we were headed down a very scary road of spending a lot of money that we didn't have. And as a homeowner and a taxpayer, I appreciate the council and our staff reevaluating all this. So that's all I have to say. I think, so I sent, my computer's dead, and so Jennifer was kind enough to send the questions to Councilmember Goza, who hopefully will answer some of our water users' concerns.
I have some questions before I get to those, and I think that my question might wrap up some of the ones that you had already asked, Ms. Dogans. I have concerns about the effect of the 1952 case, which is City of Texarkana versus Wiggins, where it basically states that a geographical line such as a city limit cannot be an arbitrary factor that you determine what it costs to provide service to somebody. And so that seems to be exactly what we're doing. What I see is an absolute possibility of somebody in Six Creeks who is outside of the city limits using the same 5,500 gallons as somebody inside in hometown Kyle. So same peaking demand, same everything. They could be side-by-side customers, and one of them will still pay significantly more because they are past a geographical line. And that, to me, does not seem to fall in line with that 1952 case, nor with the reaffirmation in the Supreme Court in 2021. So that highly concerns me about this rate study. It would seem that we have not picked out specific implant, which is used to provide that service, to actually prove that they cost that much more to service. So can you speak to that?
I'm not familiar with the case that you just mentioned, so not really. As it relates to the outside city limit methodology that we followed, it is in line with industry standard to use that for customers that are not inside the city limits and don't pay taxes. And that's the methodology that we followed.
Okay, I will be sending those two cases through our city attorney because from what I'm reading and looking at, it does not appear that we have met that standard that has been supported through Supreme Court rulings. So that is highly concerning. And I think that was a tremendous amount of the concern that Ms. Dogans had and others have had. And we want to know, so a lot of hers were identifying any cost category where the ETJ customers are paying more than their proportional share. You willing to correct the allocation? A lot of these, I believe, are going to fall in line with, one, adjusting our reserve amounts, our capital requirements, and being able to redo that. But I strongly, strongly have concerns that we have not specifically proven that our rates are not discriminatory based on that 1952 case. Using just an arbitrary line versus exactly what it costs in the equipment, lines, everything else to provide service just seems very discriminatory to me.
Yeah, I will say that your outside city limit customers do peak higher than your inside city limit customers, which was really one of the drivers that pulled more cost to the outside city limit customers.
Is that because of the mix of customers we have in the city versus the mix of customers that we have who live outside of the city limits?
We compared residential to residential, and I mean, we have the same customer classes outside the city limit as we have inside. So residential and commercial, we kept those same classes for OCL.
And did you deduct out the irrigation to see how it might affect those peaking times? Because I did.
That's not typical for the methodology to do that. If they're irrigating in the summertime and they're peaking, that's what drives the peaking.
We also have a lot of new home builders out there who are using those irrigation lines. And so when I subtracted that out, it put the peak back at normal on the percent, like an even percent, 15%. So it dramatically increased how those customers use that. And so if we're in a period of build out in those areas, it does not seem exactly fair to charge that to our residential customers who are living there, because it's artificially inflated during those peak building seasons.
That's a good point.
Okay. Ms. Stogans, was there anything else specifically? Okay. Thank you.
Well, we appreciate it.
And
It's our
council-
job as our elected duties to make sure that you guys are heard because you're our customers and our neighbors, and so.
And to add to that, Councilmember Goza, when we do the next update,
Right.
we're looking at perhaps, even though the utility basis for outside city customers is acceptable methodology by the American Water Works Association, we will be looking at perhaps changing that methodology to a cash basis. I've also, in my head, I'm thinking long-term, do we need to have an inside-outside city separation? So we'll look at all those options. We'll bring it back to council for your consideration.
Yeah, and I also wanted to add to your point that, as I mentioned before, that doing this cost of service analysis on a regular basis every, 3 to 5 years kind of takes into account, high building periods as well as, maybe once that smooths out, that cost of service could look different. So I will acknowledge that as well.
Thank you.
And when you have a utility like Austin, that's 400 square miles, it would make sense for inside-outside distinction. When you have a city of Kyle that's 19 square miles and we're on top of each other, perhaps we should re-examine that.
Yeah, and I want to state for the record that Raftellus was provided the information last year, meaning they worked with the numbers that they were given. The city gave them information, they utilized that, and that's how we got that rate. So Raftellus was doing their job in a way with the information they were provided ultimately. Yes, so I see a hand up in the back. And was that you? I don't know if you want to speak. Here's the deal. To keep the meeting orderly, I just want to make sure that you're going to speak on this item. Okay, so, and I want to explain too that normally you would just fill out a comment and you would speak before the item presenter came up here. But I am all for, once she's done, you are more than welcome to come up and speak. But normally it's prior to, but I know we're all new to this. So if you can fill out a form over there and then you can give it to me and then I'll give it to Jennifer. But I want to give everybody the ability to speak out. And I also want to, again, kind of bring some grace to Raftellus because, no, I know how it works from behind the scenes. Some people are like, it's all Raftellus, but no, these are companies that take information that's provided by the city and that's provided by the city manager. It should be at least, and then they create the information out of that. So I don't want to build any hostility towards the company because they do exactly what we ask them to do. So does anybody else have any? Councilmember Medina?
So as seen on your slide number 19, with the budget considerations for 2027, with the 26 model, we were forecasted originally for an additional 20% increase this year. But with the cost containment and efficiency measures that Perez was able to work through for us to fix things that need fixing. Had he not done that, had Perez not been our magic man filling the spot for us and worked these things out for us, do you think you would have come back then with this study and said that we needed more than a 20% increase?
I can't. I'm out of. It would be dependent on the budget that we were given to be able to answer that. I mean, it would have been at least a 20% if that budget hadn't changed from the forecast that we were.
If the budget had gone up, then it could have been more than 20%.
Correct.
Okay. Thanks, Perez.
Councilmember McKinney?
I think it's also important to note, too, that at this time last year, we were just coming out of the drought restrictions, and we really didn't know what our our demand usage was going to be. We'd basically been capping residents for a significant amount of time, and that drove our revenues down. And so we were kind of flying a little bit blind when it came to what we were expecting that we were going to need, just because we didn't know basically how much water we're going to sell as a utility. So if you're not selling enough water, then you run into problems paying your bills as a utility. One question that I had, I was under the impression that we were legally not allowed to operate at a deficit. And you've got us, I think it was slide 21, where our expenses are exceeding revenue, and the intention is to draw on the reserves. Is that requirement just for M&O, or is it overall?
I think that's just for M&O. I mean, for the enterprise fund, obviously, we don't like to run at a deficit, but your fund balances, as I mentioned, are fairly healthy, which is why we forecasted this. But again, it's really important to consider where you are, where we will be in FY. We'll be looking at FY 29 and during 28. And so it'll be important to see how the system, how your revenue has been tracking. Have we been able to maintain that operating fund balance before we would really recommend, the lower rate increases? All of that would need to be taken into consideration.
Yeah, I think we all want to avoid those as much as possible.
Correct.
We pay for the water just like, every other resident does. We have been fortunate that, the water usage has gone up. We actually sold more than we were anticipating whenever we set those rates last year. So
that is correct.
Yeah, we are in a better position than we were a year ago, significantly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, that is correct.
Okay.
That's all I have for now.
Mayor Pro Tem?
To kind of reiterate your question, Councilmember Medina, the rates were going to go up. When I was having my conversation last year with the former city manager, and that was one of my biggest concerns when we were having those conversations, that in-city rates were going to go up the same, and I think the out-of-city was going to go up about the same amount too. So that's why when we were doing the 77%, it was talked that they were going to go up another 20%. So it would have been close to 90% within 2 years. And then we had just increased the city, and then last year 20. So within a matter of 3 years, the city of Kyle residents would have had a 60% water increase in 3 years, and the ETJ was going to go up another 20%. So that's what it was like. It was going to go up 97% within 2 years.
Okay, are there any more questions? All right, I'll have, if you want to.
Can I say something?
Oh, yes, go ahead.
All right. Sorry about that. I know there's a slight lag. So I think, one, I just wanted to state for the record that the Supreme Court case that Councilmember Goza had spoken about, that 1952 case, they stated that the city could not create arbitrary, quite literally because the city at that point, Texarkana, had passed an ordinance with absolutely no documentation associated to it. Like, they didn't provide any reasoning as to why they were creating separate amounts for in-city limits and out-of-city limit rates. So this is just contextually extremely different. The other question that I had was, I know that the way in which our cost structure is built has 6 different tiers, if I remember correctly. And I think my question is, how does that differ from Lifeline rate structures? And I know that Lifeline rate structures have different variations, but I'm just wondering, how does ours compare to what those usually look like?
Yeah, typically a Lifeline rate is where you give water so you maybe don't have a charge for water between say 0 to 2,000 gallons. Say they only pay whatever the base charge is typically how a lifeline rate is set up. Pervez and I have talked about looking at your rate structure next and possibly, looking at having a lower volume rate for the lower tiers would be something we could look at. And, looking at, you've got 6 tiers now, the possibility about reducing those and really sending a bigger pricing signal to your larger users. So that is definitely something we could look at. But yeah, typically a lifeline rate is where you give your lower users where they don't pay a volumetric rate. However, I will say that from a conservation perspective and the Water Development Board recommendation is that you charge for every drop of water that's used. So one of the things that we're seeing in the industry is what we call an essential affordability kind of rate for that lower tier, where that lower tier, the rate, they still pay for the water they use, but it's a much lower rate. And of course, we take that into account as we're determining how much revenue that class would need to pay.
Okay, yeah, because I was looking into it, and the National Resources Defense Council, which is like one of the longest standing like environmental nonprofits in the US, actually has a toolkit specifically on lifeline rate structures and the different ways in which they're composed. And so I think you spoke about 2 different variations of them, which is the kind of that lower tier doesn't have to pay for that water usage. And then the other option, I mean, there's several others that were listed in this toolkit that they provide. But one of those other options was that for those who just use a very limited amount, they have like a fixed rate, or it's just substantially lower in comparison. And so that way the offset is like there's the greater difference between like those who are using a lot more are just going to face a steeper penalty in order to try to keep rates as low as possible for the majority of people who use below a certain amount. And so I think that's something that I myself am definitely interested in learning more about, and I would like for us to explore that option, especially because we are in precarious economic conditions that I know are affecting our households. So if there are ways in which we can help alleviate some of that stress and struggle, it is something that I deeply want us to look into.
Okay, so I have some more questions. Ms. Shakira Jackson, I don't know if you want to speak or if you want me to. I can, let me ask the question. Yeah, if you want to come and speak at citizens' comments, you can. Okay, yeah, I think that's going to be one of the most important things that we can do. For me, it's always knowledge, right? So if we can inform our residents of how their bills are structured and how they get paid, how they get charged, because she says she has a neighbor who fills their pool, and their bill is higher than his or hers, and they have. Okay. Yeah. She has several detailed bills. Their bills are an average of $380 to $400, which to me, that's like my electric bill on a summer month. So I completely understand the concern. And she also stated that the irrigation system was off from last October until the June of this year. And yet their bill has stayed the same. So I think that would be something that we would get you with staff. I don't have your phone number, or email. So if you want to fill this, I can have, is it okay, Perez, if we have staff reach out to her? I think,
Mayor, if we can have her contact information, staff will reach out.
okay,
It is very possible that the meter is malfunctioning or the builder swapped the meters between the two neighbors.
okay.
We'll
All right.
look at all that.
Yeah, well, since I was elected in 2020, water has, and cost and usage has always been an issue. I want to say right now, we're all speaking out about it, and we hear you, and the outside users especially, but I remember having the same conversation with Perez. And so I don't know if going to a tiered, like Councilmember Zapata has suggested, it would be better for understanding our billing. But as a city, we've got to do better so we don't have residents that mistrust us. Because at the end of the day, I truly believe if they trust that we're giving them accurate information, they'll be less angry or scared, or they'll feel secure. And I think that's what you need to have a successful government and a successful city, is to feel secure. So if nobody has any more questions, we're going to move on.
I have a comment.
Go ahead.
I actually went out to Ms. Jackson's home last summer, and I looked at both the water meter for her and her neighbor. And even though we had gone and verified that everything was turned off in the house, you could still see it fluctuating, just like phantom metering. And that happened with her neighbor as well. And then I had her go run her faucet for 10, 15 seconds, and then that phantom metering stopped. So we know that there's not a leak, because if it stops as soon as she turns that off, why did the meter stop running? Because there was nothing different other than just running the faucet for that few seconds. And it's kind of the same scenario with her neighbor, from what I recall. And we had brought that up to our water billing, and they were like, your meter's working fine, you just use a lot of water, was basically how it was treated. But if I'm seeing that, sometimes that can be from thermal changes at the end of a line, which is where she's at. So I do have some concerns about how our systems are working out there, and whether there is some phantom metering going on that's raising their bills extremely high.
We'll look at it, for sure.
Okay. And that's what you get when you get an active council. Okay, do you want to come fill out your information? All right, we are,
So Mayor, with the final report, I just need direction based on my recommendation to City Council. We're not using the cost of service study. We're putting that on side. They have completed their assignment. I'm going to ask them to complete their report, so that project is finished. And then as part of the budget process, on September 5th will be our first public hearing on fees, rates, charges, property tax rates. So the rate that I am recommending, no change in rate, will be part of that process on the 5th before you, unless y'all give me a different direction today.
can we also have you bring a tiered system like Councilmember Zapata have requested?
So that needs to be really examined and studied, because Lifeline rates is great. We can give up to 4,000 gallons or 2,000 gallons embedded within your minimum charge. And council can consider that. However, the fixed cost of the utility doesn't go away. It has to be recouped from somebody. So the higher the tiers are towards the end, it will create volatility in our revenue projections. That's the drawback of that. And we need to really closely examine that and work with the experts like Reftelis. What's the sweet spot to make that happen? And I can't do that in 2 weeks.
Okay, fair enough.
Okay? So that will be part of the September 5th rate public hearings,
All right,
if nothing changes today.
I'm good with it. Are you guys okay?
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, are we on to agenda item 2? Receive a report, hold a discussion, and provide staff direction regarding the city's property tax information and rates for tax year 2026 or fiscal year 2026 to 2027, including but not limited to the following: certified taxable property evaluations, comparison of 26 and 25, certified taxable property evaluations, property tax rate calculations and options for fiscal year 26-27, proposed property tax rate for fiscal year 26-27, looking ahead to fiscal year 27-28, next steps and city council direction. Item presenter, Perez Mohit.
So Mayor Pro Tem, council members, we're shifting gears. We're now going to talk about property tax valuations and tax rate options for council to consider. So this is what I'm planning to cover this evening with y'all. I'm going to give, because we have new council members for the first time working with us on budget, on tax rates, I want to spend a little time on giving you some background information, especially some definitions. We'll go over the taxable assessed valuation and property tax rates for tax year 26. And then talk a little bit about, very briefly, looking ahead to fiscal year 27-28. Because if you recall, every time I talk about cost containment, budget, I'm looking at 2 years at a time. And then we'll talk about next steps, and then we'll open it up for questions. So, background on property tax information. Senate Bill 2 in the 86th legislative session, which was in 2019, made significant property tax reform, including changes to the truth in taxation process, how cities and counties and school districts and water districts went about calculating their tax rates. It was huge. A lot of major changes happened in 2019. So some of the definitions and rates that we toss around, I wanted to spend time a little bit to give you all an understanding of what those are. Prior to Senate Bill 2, we used to have effective tax rate. Under this new law, that was changed with the new name to make it easier for residents and taxpayers to understand what that was. They named it no new revenue tax rate. And I'll go over each one of these, how it works. The rollback tax rate was renamed or redefined to voter approval tax rate for ease of understanding. Maintenance and operation rate was renamed to no new revenue maintenance and operations or M&O tax rate. And then they introduced 2 additional tax rates: de minimis tax rate and unused increment tax rate. Those 2, especially the de minimis tax rate, doesn't apply to us because our tax revenues are more than $500,000. So I won't spend a lot of time on that one, but I will explain the others. So what is a no new revenue tax rate? What used to be the effective tax rate? This is a tax rate that would provide a local taxing unit, such as a city or county, with approximately the same amount of property tax revenue as the previous year, but it has to be from the same properties that were taxed in that previous year. So that basically is, what is the tax rate that needs to be set or calculated that would allow the city or the taxing entity, city or county, to raise the exact same amount, approximately the same amount, as the prior year from the same properties on the tax roll. So that's the new revenue tax rate. The voter approval tax rate, which was the old rollback tax rate, this is a tax rate calculated and derived using a very specific prescribed formula that, if exceeded by the taxing entity and it's adopted by that entity, an automatic election is triggered for voters to approve or reject that tax rate. So basically, in a nutshell, it is your no new revenue tax rate, M&O, plus what the city or county needs to pay their debt service, principal and interest on the coming fiscal year, plus a 3.5% increase to the M&O side of the tax rate.
Can I clarify, the voter approval tax rate
Sure.
could also be one that's already been approved via like a bond, and you can raise it up to that amount? Is that correct as well?
So and I'll go in a minute, tax rate has two components: the maintenance and operations component and the INS, or the debt service component. So the debt service component is always adjusted to whatever that entity needs to pay its obligations. But the M&O floats, and I'll show you in a minute with some examples.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify, because the voter approval tax rate can go to a bond and we can say yes or no, but it could also be pre-approved in like our road bond. We said we would bring it up to 0.59?
No,
No, okay,
doesn't matter what we said.
okay,
Each year, tax rates are calculated based on property tax roll, certified tax roll, and it has 85 steps that you have to go through to adjust for various things that the state law requires.
okay.
So just because we said 59 cents for road bonds does not guarantee us 59 cents tax rates. And I'll
Okay.
show you in a minute. That'll get us in trouble.
Okay, thank you.
So what adopted tax rate triggers an election? Automatic voter election. That happened in Austin, that happened in a number of communities. If the adopted tax rate is below voter approval tax rate, no election is required. If the adopted tax rate is above the voter approval tax rate, an election is automatically required. If the adopted tax rate is below the no new revenue tax rate and below the voter approval tax rate, then for sure no election is required. Property tax rates are typically expressed in up to 6 places after the decimal. So for example, you'll see, if you go to Hays County Tax Assessor's website, they publish a list of all the taxing jurisdiction in Hays County and what their tax rates are, both for M&O and for INS. Most of those, you will see they're up to 6 places. So I just wanted to kind of explain that, why you see up to 6 digits and how to read those 6 digits. So this is just a refresher, and it's a refresher for me every year because I don't use 6 digits. I should in my personal bank account, but. So if you had a tax rate of 0.123456 per $100 tax assessed valuation. If you look at my chart, the first place after decimal is 1/10. Second place, 100. So on and so forth. When you get to the 6th place, now you're in the 1/1,000,000th. So if you had a tax rate in 6 digits, and it was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, you would have to read it as 123,456 millionth of a dollar. It's very confusing, right? It's hard for average taxpayers to understand. to translate, to calculate. We in the city of Kyle, ever since I've been here, they used to, when I got here, it was 6 digits. The first time I proposed a tax rate to city council, I moved it to 4 places. We don't need to go beyond that. A lot of entities will do that to make the tax rate look low because they're banking on those last 3 digits. But it's hard for taxpayers to understand and calculate. So for Cal, we only go up to 4 places. A lot of the ESDs, you will see they will do 6 places. So this is our current property tax rate, the one that has been adopted and approved by council. It has 2 components. Our tax rate for current year is 59.57. That's the easiest way to read your tax rate and describe your tax rate to anybody instead of going in those tenths and millions and thousands. It's 59.5 cents. So the 2 components of a tax rate are maintenance and operations, or commonly referred to as M&O rate, and interest in sinking, or referred to as the INS rate. Maintenance and operation rate covers and pays for things like salaries in the general fund, police officers, our staff in the Parks Department, our library folks, finance department, purchasing, city attorney, city manager's office. Those are general operating costs paid for through the M&O rate. Now in City of Kyle, if you remember, we talk about our 4 or 5 top different sources of revenues. Our property tax revenue is not enough to cover our entire general fund budget by itself. It is a portion of it. It's one of the largest sources. So we have property tax revenue, we have sales tax, we have development revenue, and we have a whole bunch of other revenues. But this M&O is a component of the general fund sources of revenue to pay for our everyday expenses, operating expenses. The interest in sinking fund, that tax rate is determined based on our obligation, what we need to pay next year. So with tax, with property tax, not the utility debt, this is just for tax-supported obligations. So a good example would be the road bonds or the sidewalks or parks improvements, things of that nature. So our current rate, if you look at the red line, is 59.57 cents per $100. Last year before, it was 46.93. So just give you a background perspective of where we're starting. I started keeping this chart to kind of track our tax rate history. So the blue part of this bar, of each bar, is the M&O rate, and the yellow part of the bar is the INS, or the debt rate. And I will only highlight the 3 ones that I want to call to your attention. If you look at the tallest bar in this 39-year history, I believe it's 39, the tallest bar is in 1992 when our city's tax rate was 69.26. That was the highest rate ever. The lowest rate was in 2008. That's the shortest bar somewhere in the center. That was 27.07. And then today, if you look at the last bar in 26, that's our current adopted tax rate of 59.57. So that kind of gives you a perspective of how we have moved through the time spectrum, and the rates have fluctuated, right? It is based on a number of things that come into play. valuations, debt, and the tax law at the time. So the next slide is just current approved property tax rates comparison. Most of these cities may propose a tax increase. We don't know yet, but this is their adopted tax rate for this year that we're comparing to. I know Pflugerville was doing something with their tax rate. Austin was doing something. Buda was considering something. I don't know exactly where they are in their budget process. So let's move on to the taxable assessed valuation and property tax rates of our discussion. So one thing that we need to talk about, and that was covered in my emails that I have sent to council to let you all know that we had an issue with TERS number 4 that we were trying to resolve with the help of our partners at the Tax Assessor Collector's Office and primarily with the Hayes Central Appraisal District. It got resolved late yesterday. So we had to recalculate all the tax rates. But to give you a background, in '24, the city of Kyle expanded the boundaries for TERS number 4 to include significantly more tracts of land and also increase the tax revenue increment participation from 40% to 50%. And I have attached an agenda item. You have all the backup in exhibit number 3 to this agenda item that gives you a background of what that amendment was all about. I wanted to take a moment to express my and our city as a whole, council and staff, our appreciation, our sincere appreciation, and thanks to the staff of the Hayes Appraisal District. They came through and saved our bacon. They didn't have to. They're going through protests. Their plate is full. We had assumed it's going to take them longer, and we had assumed that we will just use the estimates this year and true up next year. But they came through. They gave us the final valuations. So I wanted to thank them for their assistance in reconciling and reconstructing the final base valuation for TERS number 4. Their responsiveness, their professionalism, and collaboration were instrumental in ensuring the accuracy of the valuation and enabling the city of Kyle, us, to meet our truth in taxation requirements. That means a lot, especially with staff that has their plate full with all the protests that they're handling. But it means a lot to us because now we are able to give you a certified tax rate instead of an estimated piece of it that was missing.
Can I just briefly clarify what we're being told right now? Because I always say Perez is way too smart for me, but in simple terms, what happened was there was a change to this TERS area in the city of Kyle that was never documented with the county. So when we received our evaluations, they were incorrect because we needed to go back and say, hey, this part belongs to the county and this part belongs to the TERS. So this TERS is county and city combined, correct?
Yes, now it is.
Now
after
it
the
is. Yeah,
amendment.
no. I'm just trying to give a feel of what led up to this.
Yeah, so let me just give you a brief background.
Okay.
So when TERS 4 was initially created, it was a city-only TERS. It was just us. County was not participating in number 4. Then in 2024, they did two things. The city did two things. We expanded the boundary, we changed the increment participation, and we also had county participate at 50%. So it became a bigger TERS with more increment, possible increment, and the city's portion went up from 40 to 50%.
So, but that money was included in our general fund and needed to be removed and placed back into the TERS fund?
So this is how it impacts it on the tax calculation side. The core city, the valuation, when we receive the valuation, we receive the entire city, including TERS's, all 6 of them. We have to pull the value out of the core city to calculate the tax rate, what it would impact for the city. So if TERS's base value was incorrect, then our entire calculation for no new revenue tax rate, for voter approval tax rate, and our proposed tax rate would be off. So the initial value for TERS number 4 was 5 million, the base value. The day you create a TERS, you have to identify what the base value is on that day. That goes to the general fund. Any tax collected on that goes to general fund. The word increment comes from when that base value increases over time, that incremental revenue increase goes to the TERS. But everything on the base goes to the owner, city or county, whoever owns that TERS. So that's how it works. So in TERS 4's case, the initial valuation was 5 million. County was showing something much higher, 26 million. Then the city's pit advisor was showing $200 million plus. So it was a wide variation. So we needed the appraisal district to reconstruct the valuation of on the day of creation, when the amendment happened. That took a lot of effort on their part to do that. But what caused it is what we need to identify and fix it going forward. So when you either create a TERS or amend a TERS, the creating entity, in this case the City of Kyle, should have identified the metes and bounds of the new boundary to the appraisal district, so they can start identifying the base value on that date and moving forward. Somehow, somewhere, that step was overlooked for TERS number 4. I don't know if staff got too busy, sidetracked, whatever happened, but it never got to the appraisal district to identify their metes and bounds for TERS number 4. Had that been done, none of this would have occurred. So,
And that also affected the county.
yes, because they're 50% also participating. So they needed to have the same valuation that we needed. So we both decided if appraisal district was not able to do it by the deadline we both had, that we would go with the best estimate we had, which was our pit advisors, until the next cycle when appraisal district completed their research. Fortunately, they came through yesterday. Both the county and us, we're taking their base valuation. And that base valuation is around 154 million. So we had 5, county had 26 or 22, and then P3 had 200 plus. Hays County comes in, gives us the reconstructed amount, about 154 million. And I'll show you in a minute how that impacted us. So I wanted to just formally thank our appraisal district partners for helping us out. So this TERS 4 issue impacted the no new revenue tax rate, the voter approval tax rate, and our proposed tax rate calculations. On top of it, we also have a very unusual property tax situation this year for City of Kyle. no new revenue rate usually is always lower than the voter approval tax rate for a municipal government, county government. Typically, no new revenue rate is always the lowest of the two. Voter approval rate typically is higher than the no new revenue rate because the law allows an additional 3.5% for M&O. So intuitively, it should always be higher than the no new revenue rate. However, there are situations where the no new revenue rate can actually be higher than the voter approval rate. And there are reasons for that, legitimate reasons. The City of Kyle's 2026 no new revenue rate, when I was working on this slide, at that time we were working with estimates, so I had to say, is expected to be higher. For sure now we know it is higher, so I'll go over that in a minute. The most common reasons for this uncommon situation arises when there is a significant reduction in the amount of required principal and interest payment due the following tax year. And if you recall, in the current tax year, in 26, City Council approved debt defeasance, which we had to include in the debt obligations in this year's tax rate. Well, next year we're not having a debt defeasance, so that amount of difference falls off. In addition, there is a slight, not significant as debt service, there is a slight reduction in our valuation for next year. That also plays into the no new revenue to be lower than voter approval tax rate. So that, as a backdrop, a number of things are in play when it comes to tax rate. So this slide changed 3 times because of TERS number 4. The numbers I'm showing you here are net of all 6 TERS valuations. So this is just for the core city. The 2026 taxable assessed valuation, this is the net of the TERS's, is $6,346,275,039. The year before, same set of numbers, was $6,479,620,260. A decline of $133,345,000, which is 2.06. If you recall, initially I had shared with you that we were somewhere between 1.23 and 1.28% reduction. But because how the TERS valuation moved, it impacted us slightly more. It's now 2.06%. So this is overall core city's taxable valuation. So the 26 property tax rates. So let me stop here for just a second and kind of explain to you when I say 26 and also talk about fiscal year, you'll see 2 different dates. The tax year, property tax rates are set using a tax rate calendar. Our budget uses a fiscal year calendar. So the tax rates are set in this calendar year, which is 26. Tax bills will go out in October, which is 26. So it is tax year 2026, and it is also fiscal year 26-27. So when you hear those two things together, it's the same for us. So for 26 property tax rates, there are a lot of numbers on this slide, so let me walk you through how the slide is formatted. On the left side, I have the two components of the tax rate, maintenance and operations, interest and sinking. That totals up that yellow highlighted line, total property tax rate. Then I try to show you the dollar change from the adopted tax rate and the percentage change from adopted tax rate. So going towards your right, the second column is our adopted tax rate for this year. So every column is going to be compared to the current tax rate. Okay? The next column over is the no new revenue tax rate for 26. After that is the voter approval tax rate. After that is the proposed tax rate option 1, proposed tax rate option 2. And I will explain to you how I got to those options 1 and 2. So looking at the current tax rate, it's 59.57. That's our adopted tax rate. Each one of these columns I'm going to compare to this base rate now. So the no new revenue tax rate for next year, or this 26 tax year, fiscal year 27, calculated to be 0.6322 per $100. It is 3.65 cents higher than our adopted tax rate today, or 6.13%. The voter approval tax rate comes out to 0.5650. This is the next column over. Now, when you compare that to the adopted tax rate, it is 0.307 less than the adopted tax rate, or 5.15% less than our current adopted tax rate. Then I give you two options to consider. You don't have to take these. They're not set in stone. Proposed property tax rate option 1 for your council's consideration is 0.5600. It's less than the voter approval tax rate, and it is less than the no new revenue tax rate, and definitely is less than our current adopted tax rate. So if council was to adopt option number 1, it would be 3.57 cents less than our adopted tax rate, or a reduction of almost 6% in the tax rate. Same thing for option number 2. It would be, if council was to consider option number 2, and I'll show you in a minute why and how these were calculated, the tax rate would be 53.40. And if you compare it to the adopted tax rate that we have today, it would be 6.17 cents less than the adopted tax rate, or a 10.36% tax rate reduction. Before I move on, one thing to keep in mind, and we can keep coming back to this slide 15, is important because all 5 of our tax rates are in one place, side by side. You can see it in one visual. We know from this tax law that we just talked about, we can't go over the voter approval tax rate unless council wants voter election. So that's locked in. Voter approval tax rate is 56.50. That's the maximum we can adopt without triggering the election. So that's the max, right? We know we cannot adopt the same current year tax rate of 59.57 because it's higher than the voter approval tax rate. So that's off the table. We know we can't adopt a no new revenue tax rate because that this year is higher than the voter approval tax rate. So that will trigger bond election. So that's off the table. So all we have now left are the three right columns. So you've got the maximum voter approval tax rate, 5650. Then I've shared with you two options that are within that range, right? 5340 being on the low end, 5650 being on the high end, and 5600 being in the middle. So let's talk about how they came about and what it does to the revenue. So the next 4 slides, and I apologize for all these numbers, but that's what tax rate calculation is all about. But I will simplify it as best as I can. The next 4 slides are going to look and feel exactly the same. So let me take the time to explain to you how each one of these is set up. In the heading, you will see the type of tax rate we're talking about on this slide. So in this case, it's the no new revenue tax rate, okay? Then when you look at the center, the spreadsheet, the table, it has 2 sections divided by that blue, dark blue bar. To the left, we're comparing whatever tax rate we're talking about to the current adopted tax rate. So in this case, we're talking about no new revenue tax rate. And if you look at the second column, which is highlighted, that's the no new revenue tax rate. And the column right next to it is the city's current adopted tax rate. So when you compare the two, it gives you the increase, decrease, dollar, and the increase, decrease in percentage. So that's all it's doing. So, and I'll come back to it. Let's go on the other side of the blue bar. On this side, I am trying to show you what the proposed budget has for property tax revenues, for M&O, and for INS. Then I'm showing you right next to it, if you were to adopt this rate, whatever rate we're talking about, that's the amount of revenue it's going to generate right next to the budget. And same thing here, I'm comparing the budget to the tax rate calculated revenue and giving you a comparison. Is it going to give me more money, less money, and what that difference is? Okay? Everybody make sense? All right. So let's walk through the 2 things that will stay constant in the next 4 slides. The current adopted tax rate, the second column from the left, and the city manager's proposed budget revenue will stay constant in all of these comparisons because the budget has already been presented, those numbers are locked in, the current adopted tax rate is already adopted, is locked in, and those are the 2 things we're comparing to. So when you look at the no new revenue tax rate of 6322, and you compare that to our current adopted tax rate of 5957, it is 3.65 cents higher than our adopted tax rate, or 6.13%. And for discussion purposes only, we know we can't adopt this tax rate because it's higher than the voter approval tax rate. If that tax rate was to be implemented, it would raise $39.8 million, which is much higher than what the proposed budget already has. That we have balanced the budget using those numbers, we have closed the gap, and we have restored the reserve. based on those numbers. So it gives you, if you look at the comparison, the M&O will bring in $6.3 million more than we need, and the INS will be about $88,000 less. But net together, it'll be $6.2 million more than what the budget already has built in. Do y'all have any questions before I go to the next? Because I want to make sure that y'all understand the setup, because it'll be the exact same setup. Okay, so next one up is the voter approval tax rate. This is the rate that we cannot exceed without triggering bond election. So when you compare the voter approval tax rate of 56.50 to our adopted tax rate of 59.57, it is 3.07 cents less than the adopted tax rate, or 5.15%. So this is the max we can set our tax rates on. We can't exceed it, which is 56.50. And if we were to adopt this tax rate, what will it do to the revenues? So when you look at the M&O revenue, we had budgeted $21,450,000 and $300. It will bring in $23,545,000, or $2 million, slightly over $2 million, more than what we have in the budget. There's nothing wrong with it. It's a policy decision. On the INS side, it'll be about the same, roughly. I'm not worried about the $88,000 shortfall because none of these numbers are going to land exactly the way the spreadsheet is saying, because you'll have protests, you will have people going into bankruptcies, businesses going into bankruptcies. All those factors will come into play, right? The appraisal review board's decisions may affect these numbers as well. So at 56.50, if you were to adopt the voter approval tax rate, it will give the general fund an additional boost of $2 million. This is the high end of the tax rate spectrum that we talked about on slide 15. So here's option one. So on this option, what I did was I looked at a midpoint, because when we were talking about the budget presentation on August 1st, some council members were interested in perhaps providing for some wage adjustment for our employees, because if you recall, my recommended proposed budget has no merit increase or cost of living adjustment, zero. So when I heard that conversation, when I was working on the tax rate, I said, okay, at what tax rate will it help us if council was to decide to implement that option? And I think for all our employees, 1% is about $500,000, roughly. So if you were to adopt a tax rate of 56.00, it's lower than the voter approval tax rate. It will give us the money we need for our debt obligations, but it will also give you about $1.8 million cushion in your general fund. And the overall tax rate is lower than the current adopted tax rate. So that's option number one. That's how I came up with it. There's no magic to it other than listening to council members' comments at the August 1st meeting. If that was to be looked at, this is one possibility. Then I said, okay, let's look at an option that would generate, what tax rate would generate exactly what we have in the budget, or as close as I can get to what's in the budget. Because when you're working with 4 digits and 6 digits, it's very difficult to land right on the dollar. So at 53.40, which is less than the voter approval tax rate, which is less than our current approved adopted tax rate, and is less than option number 1. It will hit very close to what we have in the budget. So on the M&O side is about 140,000, 141,000. On the INS side, it's about 88,000 the other way. Net is about 53,000 together. Any questions on the 3 tax rates we compared so far before I go to the next slide? Do y'all understand how I came up with option 1 and option 2, the difference between the two? All right, so if you were to look at option 1, what is the impact of option 1 on our average valued residential property in Kyle? That is a homestead, not a rental property, a homestead. So for an average home in last year was valued at $317,616. In 26, the average home is valued at $301,530, or a decrease of about $16,086. The average home value dropped by 5%. This information is coming from the appraisal district. So this is not something that staff projected, it's actual valuations they looked at and divided by the number of properties in that category. So if you were to take the average home valued at $301,530 and apply option 1, and if you recall, option 1 tax rate was $5,600, the base tax levy will be, I'm going across on the line where it says 2026. The tax levy for the city's tax rate, the tax bill will be $1,688.57. Now remember, we're looking at a homestead. So there's a homestead deduction we have to take out from that tax bill. You don't get taxed on that $40,000 that you get as an exemption for homestead. So using the $5,600 as the tax rate, the homestead deduction, or reduction, I should say, is $224. So the net tax bill for an average home in 26, if you were to adopt tax rate of $5,600, will be $1,464.57. But when you look at the 25 line, the value was higher, the tax rate was higher, so the base bill was $1,892.04. After you apply the homestead exemption, the net bill was $1,653.76. So if you were to adopt this tax rate, our average home valued homeowner will see a reduction of $189.19 in their tax bill, or 11.44%. This is an average. Not everybody's going to see this. Some are going to see a higher impact. Some are going to see a lower impact than this. Same calculation for option number 2. So under option number 2, remember, I'm solving for at what tax rate am I going to be able to raise the same amount of money that is in our proposed budget. So 5340 is the tax rate that will generate that. At this tax rate, the average net tax bill after the homestead reduction is $1,396.57. And if you compare that to their average bill last year, it'll be a reduction of $257.19, or 15.6%. So that's on the average bill. Now, looking ahead, any questions on the average bill calculations? Okay. Looking ahead to not next year, but the year after. Property tax rate is expected to increase in fiscal year 27-28 due to future debt service requirements. And what do I mean by that? Because I want you to be aware of, just because we're having a tax rate reduction option this year does not mean we'll have a tax rate reduction in 27-28. Because we know next year we're going to issue debt, tax-supported debt, for road bonds, because we're spending money on the road bonds that we haven't issued debt yet for that piece. We will issue debt for 5 trails that we're building. We're going to issue debt for sidewalks, parks, things of that nature. So the debt service for next year is going to go up. And so by doing that, the INS component of the tax rate is going to go up. Now, how much will it go up? We don't know, because we don't have the valuations yet for 28. It will depend on that. So the examples I used here is, why would it go up? Because we're going to, one for sure, we know we're going to issue debt. And these are for, like I said, road bonds, wide trails, street improvements, pedestrian crossing, sidewalks, intersection improvements, animal shelter. That's going to be a big one. But I don't think we're going to spend all of it next year. It's going to be spread over time. But road bonds is going to have an impact. Park improvements. The other thing to keep in mind is, as we're moving through this time spectrum, our management team and our executive team, Jesse and Amber, are helping us continuously reviewing our departments and our operating expenses. We're trying to manage those costs and control those costs. So it won't be as much a pressure on the M&O side as we will have the INS side. The pressure is going to be on the debt side in 27, 28. So fiscal year 1, with all the discussions we've had so far since May, our focus has been to structurally balance and restore reserves in the city's 4 primary funds: general fund, water, wastewater, and storm drainage. That has been our full focus and attention, to eliminate redundancies, to make it more efficient, implement cost reduction strategies. That has been our entire focus for the current year and going into next fiscal year. Year number 2, that focus will continue. However, a greater emphasis is going to be on the city's CIP program, the CIP spending plan, and the associated debt that we're going to have to issue. So it's going to be very important, very critical for staff to really scrub those numbers as to what we're going to issue in terms of debt and why. Is it one of those projects that we are just overly conservative and we want to build it 5 years in advance? Or is it something that we really truly need now that we need to spend money on? That's the exercise we're going to go through. We have, I believe, close to about 100 projects on our plate. We're going to scrub each one of those. And we're going to figure out the business case for each. We're going to figure out the timing and the sequences of each one of those. There will be some projects that will move forward from maybe 28, 29 to earlier years. There will be some projects that will get pushed aside outside of the 5-year spending plan because we were overly zealous in terms of our planning. So that's the focus that's going to happen after the budget is adopted and we get into next fiscal year. Not that we're going to forget about the operating costs. We will still continue looking at those. That will be part of our continuous improvement program. But the big money is in the CIP. Because it drives the debt, it drives the property tax rates. When we look at the total picture, our goal, our guiding principles is what is the impact to a household that we are creating based on our decisions. Not look at each one of these separately. So an average household has a property tax bill, a water bill, a wastewater bill, trash bill, drainage fee, all of those. How are we impacting an average resident and a household in Kyle? We should not look at water by itself or tax rate by itself. We should look at it in totality. So that's our goal for next year. So real quick on next steps. So tonight, Council, we talked about the cost of service study results. I'm going to ask the consultant to finalize the report and we can close that project. We reviewed the property tax calculations, valuations, and there's another agenda item that Amy is going to cover at the end, which is an approval of a resolution. This is required by state law, and she'll explain it to you how that works. Saturday, September 5th at 5:30 p.m., our first set of public hearings will begin. We'll have our first reading on the budget adoption ordinance. We'll have the first reading on the property tax rate adoption ordinance. And first reading on property tax increase ratification if it's applicable. And Amy's going to explain that, whether that's going to come into play or not based on the rates that y'all adopt. Then on Tuesday, September 15th at 7 p.m., we have our second round of public hearings, second reading of the ordinances. That will happen on September 15th. We have to have one of these meetings on a regular city council meeting agenda. It's required by city charter. We had to have September 15th to meet the state law requirements between notice requirements, public hearing dates, and September 15th is also state law plus city charter.
On that right there, Mr. Perez.
Yes, sir.
Are there any things that we can maybe table that night if there's any urgent or non-urgent agenda items?
On the 15th?
On the 15th.
Yes, sir. We're looking at that now.
Could we, maybe council members, if they're trying to bring an agenda item, would you mind kind of double checking and looking to see if there's something that's precedent that you might need to bring for council for discussion? By all means, I'm open to that, but I know as we're getting into September, these conversations get long.
Yes, sir.
And they're important. We could have a large turnout in our audience. So maybe that could be something council could consider if there's an agenda item that maybe could be tabled till the
following meeting.
To the following meeting, or maybe in October. Just so that way we could have it for
Yes, sir.
discussion time. just for
Dedicated time
consideration.
for budget discussion.
Yes, because that's.
We're looking at that unless it's absolutely critical and
Consent
emergency.
agenda
We'll
item
try to
for-
postpone it to the following meeting.
Same thing with consent agenda items. If
Yes,
it's
sir.
something that can be tabled, we can just really focus most of our September meetings.
That
on
was
this.
going to be my next question is, are y'all okay with the consent agenda, or you want me to look at that as well?
I'm okay with the consent agenda. I mean, if somebody wants to, I think historically you've done an excellent job working with me to make a good consent, and you'll say during the meeting, I think this is going to be pulled, so I'll go ahead and put it on a different part of the agenda. And so I'm okay with the consent. If everybody else is okay, are you okay, Councilmember Spada? All right. And you guys, yeah, so we can do a consent. Let's, but I agree, let's
Yeah.
keep it as simple as possible. I vow not to put anything, although the 15th is my birthday, I vow not to put anything on there. So I think that would be fair to the residents that want to listen and speak, and fair to each other if we kind of just agree to, let's focus on the budget and the necessities.
Now, one thing I didn't mention, and I'll go back to 15, slide 15. So we have to comply with the truth in taxation requirements, and it has some specific notice requirements. And if I could request council's direction on, you don't have to vote on a tax rate. If you could let me know the range, or if you are all in agreement with, we're going with voter approval tax rate, or we're going with option 1 or option 2. I can start working on the notices that needs to be published. We have to work with the Hays County Tax Assessor Collector's Office to get those formal notices locked down. That would be helpful.
Just for the record, you do have to vote on a maximum tax rate. That's the next item. So if we can get an idea of what your maximum is, that's the next item.
We already know what our maximum is because it's the voter approved,
Right. We
Yeah.
can't exceed that.
which is below our current rate. All right, does everybody get what we're doing?
I have one question.
Go ahead.
And this might be because I'm just a little bit newer to the process, but if I had budget amendments, do I bring those up in that first reading? I mean, I would assume that I would try to bring those up beforehand, but I'm just not familiar with like when or how that's done.
So council members can bring amendments in the first, on the 5th discussion, first round of hearings. And you can also bring amendments on the 15th. So until the budget is formally adopted, council can make amendments.
Okay, all right, thank you.
I'm trying to see if we have any special meetings for the budget. It looks like Thursday, the 27th. I'm not sure what we'll be going over, but I think how I've currently done it is I just feel like we had a lot of meetings and there was a lot of discussion. And so if we do feel like we want to add another meeting to a Thursday, so we can discuss what kind of amendments we'd like to talk about. I don't necessarily, I mean, I agree, we can do it up until the 15th, but I think that kind of puts a lot of pressure on council not to have time to think things through. So if we can bring any amendments, preferably on the 5th, or if anybody wants to have a special called meeting to discuss budget amendments, I'm open to that as well. Just so everybody on council feels heard and feels like they've had opportunity to ask for these amendments. I've seen, and I will always advocate for people to go look at the Shane Araby budget amendments. It was beautiful. But I think it did put pressure on council to vote for the amendments, and rightfully so at that time. But I don't want to hopefully have to think at the last minute about that. So if we can, I'm always open, not that I want to have an extra meeting, but always open to have that meeting so we can all have an opportunity to talk about our
It's
amendments.
council's call. Whatever y'all decide, we'll make it happen.
With my experience, Councilmember Zapata, if there's any items that you want to consider for amendments, if you have it and ready to go, it would help the city to be able to have that extra time. So like the mayor says, if you have something ready to go by the 5th, then that way it gives the city to be able to adjust the budget versus at the last minute. So if there's something there that you want to consider or look at, it gives them that extra time because we will be on the clock as of September 1st because we'll have 2 meetings and then we've got to vote on the budget. So anything that you're looking at. I've learned in the past also, because there was when we had it with other years where people come in at the very last minute, like at the last day, saying, I want to add this and I need to subtract this. Well, if you're going to add a certain amendment, or you got to pull that money from somewhere else to go into what you're trying to get. And it's sometimes at the last minute, we're trying to finagle which money to pull from. If we want to increase it by 50,000 here, well, you're going to have to take 50,000 from somewhere else, or of something that nature there. So it's just,
And
it's
I'm
just my
completely ready
experience.
for that.
Yeah,
No,
cool.
I mean, I have all of my budget amendments ready. It's just that there's no like formalized process. So I think I would appreciate a special meeting for us to be able to discuss that ahead of time, because the last thing that I want to do is spring these upon council or upon staff, because that would be a lot to take in one meeting and a lot to have to change within 2 weeks' notice from September 5th to September 15th.
Yeah, that's kind of why, that's why we were recommended, and maybe Mark, you may have heard when we were coming in, if there's any like council items that we could just maybe table, or if there's anything that's urgent that we need to be able to finalize in consent, to bring it in those meetings, and just limit just the discussions for budget in September on those ends. So that way we could have opportunity to discuss like some of your amendments, if there's anything that you're bringing forward, so forth.
Okay, moving on. Do we want to plan a special meeting for a Thursday?
It's up to y'all.
Discuss this? I'd rather.
I would like to.
Yeah, I'd rather do it sooner than later, so, it's August, okay. We already have one on the 27th, don't we?
Yes.
Okay. Do we want to do it on a Saturday or Thursday? Because I know Councilmember Harris has issues the second Thursday.
Yes, she has a commitment.
So we could do it on the September 3rd. That's a Thursday. We could do it on the 20th. Today's the 13th.
Jennifer, I'm going to need your help in terms of if we're committed, if council is committed on those dates.
September 3rd's open.
Okay.
Would that be too far away, or are you comfortable with that, Councilmember Zapata?
I think my preference is like what's comfortable for the rest of everyone else and for staff. If the 3rd is acceptable, then I'm fine with that. If council or staff feels that it would be better to have it earlier than that in order to maybe take items into consideration for a September 5th proposal, then I think that's something that I'm flexible with.
From staff's perspective, Mayor, it would be helpful if it's sooner
Okay.
than later.
How about the 25th, August 25th? That's a Tuesday, though.
Well, and we can also do Saturdays then, Saturdays if you guys are okay with that.
Is there a reason we're not considering adding it to that existing Thursday on the 27th?
What is the 27th? I don't think we've
The
set the agenda for that.
27th, we have, I think we have one item, and then we have the security training.
Okay, so we have the Vibe Trail program presentation to council, and we
That's
have
gonna
the
be a long
security
meeting.
training for council.
Okay, do we have a preference for a day? Because if not, we can just do it on the 22nd, which is a Saturday, and we could do it maybe in the morning. Are you available in the morning or no?
Still not available.
Still not available,
Until
all right.
after September, I will be available on Saturdays moving forward.
Okay, what about Thursday, the 20th?
We have an ethics
Yeah.
commission meeting.
Okay.
That's why I was recommended the 25th, that Tuesday.
There's planning and zoning on
Planning,
that
zoning.
Tuesday.
Wednesday, the 26th.
I'm available.
It's available.
Are you guys
Would
available?
We
that
can
be-
do that.
Would that be okay with you, Councilmember Zapata? The 26th for your
The
amendments?
26th, I'm available.
For your amendments?
You work something? Are you okay going virtual?
If you don't mind me going off camera and talk on the phone.
You're allowed to be off camera during a virtual meeting as long as you're not discussing the business of the meeting. If that helps.
Okay. Because it's really going to be budget, but so I think we need everybody's feedback for that.
Do we want to do the 29th then, just that evening?
What about the 22nd evening? 22nd evening?
I'm
I'll
available.
have to do virtual, but I can do virtual.
Okay.
Will the 26th
For
work?
me, I might not be able to make it. I have an out-of-town work trip the 21st and 22nd, so I might be able to make it in driving back in from out of town, but I'm just not too sure around what time that would be.
Okay. Well, I think this would be mainly for you, for your amendment items. And then, of course, of anybody else. So would the 25th work, or would a Monday,
25th is P&Z.
P&Z?
Does the 23rd, a Sunday, work? Like if we just did a morning?
I'm good with that.
I'm okay with that. It's up to staff. I know it's Sunday.
Oh, I'm sorry, guys.
Yeah.
I know, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, Mayor, all our staff members go to church.
Okay,
Yeah,
that makes sense.
Okay.
No, I'm just kidding.
They can come afterwards.
I think the only option would be that Wednesday, the 25th.
Mayor Pro Tem, I was just kidding.
Just
Yeah, I
checking,
know.
yeah. So we could do I think we could do the 23rd if we make it, we put a hard stop to it, like at 2 or whatever.
I'm traveling that day. I
Okay.
cannot do the 23rd.
Okay, Mark McGinty's not gonna be here.
Okay, so was it 29th then was okay if we did the evening so that way Mayor Pro Tem was available?
You know, Mayor, Thursday, 27th is a possibility. We can reschedule the training part of it.
Okay,
We can do the Vibe Trail first and get that done, and then we can get into the budget.
okay, so my concern is, I want to give full attention to the vibe. I am positive we're gonna have people come out, and I just wanna make sure that we allot around, the right amount of time for them to come out and speak, and for us to address any concerns.
Would that start at 6?
6, there you go.
Yeah, that's
We
it.
could start at 6, and then afterwards, we would have the amendment section for you, Ms. Zapata. Would that work okay? The 27th, the meeting that we're going to have?
Yes, I think that works, especially because some of the amendments that I'm proposing might be in line in talking about the Vibe Trail. So it might be helpful to have that conversation at once.
Perfect.
And when are we gonna get the presentation for the Vibe Trail? That day, right? On the 27th?
Center Street, off-system and on-system. And then on the 10th, we're giving the entire Vibe Trail program discussion.
Okay. Okay, so I think Center Street is a main concern right now.
For a lot of people.
Yeah, and yeah, for a lot of people, for a lot of different reasons. But it's gonna be important that we also include them on the 10th, so, yeah, so we're gonna do the 27th an hour earlier.
Starting at 6?
6.
Okay.
All right, are we done with this one? We can move forward. Do you need anything else from us?
No, just one last item that Amy will cover.
All right.
Give a minute for the presentation to pop up. Okay, see the presentation? Okay. There we go. Was on the screen. Hey, good evening, Mayor and Council. Amy Alcorn, City Attorney for the record. So this item is the record vote on the tax rate. The interim city manager, as you know, is proposing an ad valorem tax rate that does not exceed the lower of the no new revenue tax rate or the voter approval tax rate. As he explained, this is a very interesting situation where our no new revenue tax rate is higher than our voter approval tax rate. And because it's an interesting situation, we had to spend a little bit of time looking into what you have to do. So Texas Tax Code Section 26.061 requires the city to post a specific notice of a meeting to approve an ad valorem tax rate like ours. However, there's no specific section in the code that requires you to take this record vote, except that the notice that we have to publish has to have a recording of who was here, who voted, and how they voted. Therefore, we still have to take the record vote. So the purpose of the item is to record the City Council's vote on a proposed ad valorem tax rate. As I mentioned, this should be the maximum rate that we can consider. So when we have our meeting to actually adopt the tax rate in September, you could approve a lower tax rate, but you could not approve a higher tax rate. And so if the council is on the fence, I recommend that you put the higher tax rate in this, because we can always lower it later. And then as the interim city manager presented, the ad valorem tax rate will be presented on September 5th and September 15th for vote. So option 1 here is to approve a resolution including the proposed ad valorem tax rate of either the voter approval tax rate or one of the two options the city manager, interim city manager provided, or to approve it with a different proposed tax rate, or to deny it altogether. I recommend approving it with whichever proposed tax rate council prefers.
Okay. I'm okay with the no new revenue rate since it's lower.
Voter approval rate. Voter approval rate.
Voter approval rate.
That's the lower one.
That's the lower, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's right,
think-
you're right.
I think for the sake of this, doing the 0.5650, just to allow us the
Right.
flexibility. I don't anticipate us being there, but for what we're trying to accomplish.
How do you guys feel? Okay with that? Do we want to wait until Councilmember Tobias comes back?
Yeah, I think he'll be right back.
Yeah, we need a roll call vote, and we need to record who's here and who's not and how they voted.
Okay.
So if we want to give Mayor Pro Tem Tobias a little bit of time.
Okay. While we're waiting, I would like to ask Councilmember Zapata if she would be okay with providing at least the interim city manager, if not council, with some of her proposed amendments? So we can be prepared. If not, that's fine too.
I will if I have them. I do have them, some of them kind of prepared, but there's still some information regarding flock contracts that I still haven't received questions about like the total amount and how that would affect our operating and our reserves.
Okay, fair enough. Well, if you can send us what you have and we can just at least have a chance to look through that, I'd like to just make sure that we give it enough thought for the changes.
Yeah, of course, and vice versa. I would appreciate it if that's going to be like a standing cordiality amongst us.
Sure, for sure, okay. Okay, so I just make an amendment to approve the voter approved rate at 0.5650.
0.5650, that's
Okay,
correct.
that's my motion.
Approving the resolution with the proposed tax rate of 0.5650.
Okay, I got a motion by myself and a second by Councilmember McKinney. Can I get a roll call vote, please?
Harris is absent. Zapata,
Yes.
Florescale,
Yes.
Tobias,
Yes.
Goza,
Yes.
Medina,
Yes.
McKinney.
Yes.
Okay, that is 6-0.
6-0,
Motion passes. And anything else before we adjourn?
Thank you, Mayor and Council.
Of course, our pleasure. Good job, guys. We are adjourned.